Hello, everybody. Want to see a magic trick? Yeah, I can hide a pencil in my hair. All right, so today's video is AI versus human poetry. Basically, what I did is I wrote three poems. One of them I had previously written, two of them I wrote today, and I gave AI the promptings based upon what I wrote about. And I wanted to see how their poems stack up to my poems. I'm first going to start with my poem about sadness when being in what should be my happy place, which is like feeling sad at the beach. So, feeling the sand slide through my fingers reminds me of the sadness that lingers. Being in such a happy place, whilst feeling down, makes me feel like a disgrace. And so for ChatGPT, I prompted it write a poem about sadness and the beach, make it 4 lines only. The tide dragged silence across the empty shore, while gulls cried softly like hearts wanting more. I buried my sadness beneath cold, salted foam, but the waves kept returning it back to my home. So I personally think that my poem is a little bit better. Now, granted, AI doesn't physically have a perspective, so it never buried its sadness in the beach. It's never experienced sadness on the beach. It can only draw from the amalgamation of a bunch of authors who've written about similar feelings. Now, in my opinion, I know the sensation itself, so obviously I'm a little biased that mine is better. I do want to say that I don't love shore and more being rhymed. I feel like that's not an amazing thing, and especially salted foam and home. It's a little weird. I also think the last line doesn't deliver very well. So it's I buried the two last lines are I buried my sadness beneath the cold salted foam, which you don't bury things beneath foam, but regardless of that point, but the waves kept returning it back to my home. The perspective is you're sitting on a beach, so I don't know why it would be returning it back to your home. Regardless, I personally think mine is better. I'm curious what you guys would have to say in the comments. My next one, and just so you guys know, I actually did prompt these things. Um, the next one is about nature. And yeah, basically, I said, to see with my eyes the beauty the rich despise, the natural world in all of its forms, my heart it truly warms. So that one I went a little bit simpler. I was just trying to throw something out there to see how it does with those perspective things. I often write in a first person perspective or in a generalist perspective, but I've noticed that AI doesn't do it too frequently. It often, from what I've seen, it when it's writing poetry, it does third person perspective. But I don't have a like this is as much experience as I have with it writing poetry because it's kind of a weird thing to prompt. But for it, I said write for a 4 line poem about nature, and it said the forest hummed beneath the silver rain, wildflowers danced across the open plain, mountains held the sunshine in their stone, and every living thing felt less alone. I personally don't hate the rhyme of rain and plain, but I think it's interesting how it went with physical descriptions of the world, like of nature, rather than talking about nature's impact on the viewer. And the every living thing felt less alone, I guess, is fine, but I think it's interesting. I don't necessarily love the rhyme of stone and alone. However, obviously, I'm going to be biased towards mine. Now, I don't actually think in this case that mine is that much better than theirs. Like eyes and despise, I feel like is a decent rhyme, but my second thing is to rhyme forms with warms, which I don't think is a very intensive rhyme. But I mean, it's not bad by any measure. None of these are technically bad. It's never in these poems that I did. It appears to have done all of the rhymes correctly. Um, Now, the one thing that I think it lacks is I often import a little bit of cynicism into every piece that I write, specifically if it has anything to do with very wealthy people. I have a little bit of cynicism that I insert into it, and you can see that with this one is the beauty the rich despise. Obviously, I'm kind of just ironically enough referring to like AI data centers being destroying the environment and a lot of the things that rich people don't really seem to value in nature, but they like having like personal things rather. And so I'm going to move on to the last one, and that is about my migraines. So this one I wrote a little while ago. This is the one I had written before today, so I had a little bit more time to think about it. But the one I wrote is the call coming from inside? Is the pain because I lied? For why does the torment persist? With this pain, how can I continue to exist? The feelings flow in, but not out. I cry out against this unwinnable bout. Freedom from it is taken freedom from it is taken for granted. It's hard to see when the world is slanted. And I feel like that does a pretty good representation of how awful a migraine feels on an emotional level, because the pain is hard to describe in a literal sense a lot of the time. But when I go through migraines, I often feel like it's an uphill battle that is almost unwinnable, because sometimes I just can't cure a migraine, or I can't get the migraine to go away no matter what methods I use. And so now I'm going to read ChatGPT's. I said, write an 8-lined poem about migraines. A hammering storm behind my weary eyes. Sharp flashes bloom like cruel and fractured skies. The sunlight turns to needles made of flame, and every whispered sound becomes the same. I hide within the dark and silent room, while hours drift in slow and heavy gloom. Yet when the ache at last begins to fade, the world returns in colors softly made. So I find it interesting that it ends on a relatively positive note, but that's pretty interesting. But overall, I don't think this one's actually as bad as the other two. The first one I think is the worst, because its logic behind burying something under seafoam doesn't make a whole lot of sense. And I generally, obviously, I know the sensations that it's describing, and I would say it's decent. Again, it's better. I don't know if I'd say it's better than my poem. I mean, going past the obvious thing that I'm actually a human being who's experienced this severe pain, and this is something that's an amalgamation of a lot of people's work that it's slamming together to say that it has experienced these things as a false first person perspective. Going past that, if we were analyzing this as another person's poem, I don't think it's a very bad one. I do like the rhyme of eyes and skies, and the fact that it uses flame and the same, like every whisper of sound becomes the same. I think that's actually pretty good. I think room and gloom is kind of, I mean, it's fine, but I definitely don't like the last. I don't like rhyming fade with made. I don't know why, but it seems, I don't know. It just doesn't seem as vibey, I guess. One thing that I do find very interesting is all of these are every line rhymes. I frequently write poems that every other line rhymes, or none of the lines rhyme, or all different sort of rhyme schemes. I even have a poem in this little journal that I have right here, where I wrote, first one rhymes with the with the fourth and fifth, or sorry, the third and fourth line, and the second line rhymes with the fifth line. So I find it interesting that this is first and second rhyme, third and fourth rhyme, and so on for all of these poems. I never clarified that the poems even had to rhyme, which I also think is interesting that it intuitively went with a rhyme scheme. The one thing I also noticed is that they did not use any forms of alliteration, and it generally didn't have any atypical formats. So, like, kind of like the type of poetry where there is no rhyme scheme at all, and it's about tempo of the piece about how the sounds land. It did not seem to take that into account, which I think is, again, interesting that it prioritized rhyming over those criteria. Now, this comes back to a more like existential kind of thought process of, would somebody having heard both of these be able to distinguish that one is AI and one is human? I'm not certain that they could. I don't know. To me, every time I hear these things from AI, they sound so bland and generic that you could say that. But at the same time, reading my own work, sometimes it also seems bland. Excuse me. It seems bland and generic. So I'm not really certain that someone could distinguish the two. I'm curious what you guys all have to think about this topic. I'm hoping that I can do more AI versus human videos in the future, maybe like one where I review its diet plan for somebody trying to lose weight versus a diet plan made by an actual dietitian or something like that, or a workout scheme, or honestly, like literally anything. I know a lot of people have compared its ability to write stories to actual story writers, and I find those really funny because they're chaotic as all get out. But yeah, that's pretty much the video for today. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you lift, remember to keep your shoulders back and down. Subscribe to the channel if you want to see whatever it is I'm doing here anymore. Like the video if you liked it, and I'll see you in the next one.